Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Call podcast. Today we are speaking with Mr. Robert Wenzel about the Panama Papers. Mr. Wenzel is editor and publisher of economicpolicyjournal.com and of targetliberty.com. He is the host of The Robert Wenzel Show and the author of The Fed Flunks, My Speech at the New York Federal Reserve Bank. You can follow his work at economicpolicyjournal.com and targetliberty.com, and you can also find him on Twitter at Wenzel Economics. For more information, please see the show notes page for this episode at wakeupcallpodcast.com/Panama-Papers. So Robert, welcome to the show.
Glad to be with you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. So let's just start off with what the Panama Papers are.
Okay, what we have is a document dump, 11 million pages or 11 million documents dumped that were dumped to a German newspaper by the name of Süddeutsche Zeitung, and they contacted the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and over a year's worth of work has been done with regard to researching the papers. The documents themselves come from a law firm in Panama called Mossack Fonseca, and what that law firm specialized in was forming Panamanian corporations for people around the world. And consequently, what we have is a list of people from around the world who opened accounts through Fonseca for various reasons, for possible legitimate reasons, for hiding payoffs, and so on and so forth.
So give us some more of that. What are some reasons why someone would want a Panamanian corporation?
Okay, well, I've noticed in a lot of the newspaper reports on the Panama Papers that they talk about it in terms of a tax haven. And although that's probably the case with regard to some of the corporations that were set up, the top reasons are if you're getting a payoff, if you're a government official and you're getting a payoff from some corporation, you don't want that necessarily seen in your own country. You don't want the money obviously going into your own account or something that is very traceable. So you see a lot of that kind of stuff. Another reason you would set up a Panamanian account is for diversification of your assets. A lot of global leaders have superior wealth beyond anything we can imagine, and it just makes sense for them to keep some of their wealth outside the country in case there's ever a coup attempt. Generally what happens, Gaddafi, for example, had wealth outside. Libya, Saddam Hussein had some of his wealth outside of Iraq, and they tend to be stubborn right at the end, and they don't leave and take advantage of what they've nested outside the country, but they do plan that way. And that's how we seemingly have this Putin account or alleged connected Putin account that had about $2 billion in it. And I've seen some reports say that he was hiding that from the tax authorities in Russia, which of course is absurd. He is the tax authority. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're hedging their bets, they're diversifying, and it was actually kind of a sloppy way to do it. The whole idea behind setting up an offshore account, like the type that was in Panama that was linked to schoolboy friend of Putin's, is to hide that wealth so no one really knows where it's coming from. And when you look at the name and discover that it is Sergei Roldugin, who's a Russian cellist, a musician, that guy's not generating $2 billion performing as a cellist. So eyebrows go up on that right away. But it was really sort of amateur night. I mean, if you really wanted to do that, what you do is you get a nominee who is not connected at all to Putin, some guy you basically just hired to put the forms together. He doesn't need to know anything else about the account. Or if Putin wanted to use Roldukin, what he should have done, I mean, this is Putin. He should have just had the guy print up a passport, had a passport printed up for this guy and another name, and flew him around the country, opening bank accounts in Switzerland and incorporating in Panama and all that kind of stuff, and it could have never been traced back to Putin. So it's kind of an odd thing. It's either amateur night or it's a CIA setup, one or the other.
So we'll get back to the Putin aspect of this in a moment. But in addition to Putin, who are some of the other powerful individuals who have been named in this? I guess you have people with powerful connections from Iceland and from Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. Who are we talking about here?
Right. The most significant one is out of Iceland as far as the impact in what happens to disclosures, and that's a guy by the name of Sigmundur Gunnlaug, and he was the prime minister of Iceland, and it turns out he had an account, and what happened was that he was forced to resign as prime minister because of the revelations of the account. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are pretty much, the officials there are pretty much denying any connections to the accounts. You also, interestingly enough, there appears to be an offshore account, offshore company, shell company, for the Prime Minister of England, Cameron. His father had one. He's recently deceased, so that one also raised some eyebrows. His father was a stockbroker, so it's possible his father was doing it for his own reasons, but then obviously, you got a son who's prime minister, and it looks very, very suspicious. So it's a lot of people, but again, any situation where you've got these, where it's a name that you can recognize associated with one of these accounts, it tells you right there it's a very amateur operation. If you're doing it right, you get a nominee, you get some guy that has nothing, absolutely cannot be connected to you in any way, and you put him on these accounts. You can make them bearer shares in some cases, and you can do your transactions after that. This guy really doesn't need to know what's going on. But to actually have these people, these people as signatories on an account, having the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca holding copies of these people's passports and stuff, it's just you can tell it wasn't really thought out, and it's not done the way somebody who's doing it carefully would do it.
Why aren't there more Americans named in these documents?
Well, that's a good question. And the most obvious thing that comes to mind is that this was a CIA leak, and they did not want any Americans to be damaged by it. You do have some Americans that were listed, but that raises more questions than anything, because they're all low-tier people who have been convicted of different kinds of Ponzi schemes and scams of that sort, and it just seems to be much lower level than what you're getting on the global level or in the rest of the world. So it's either a case of U.S. Political cronies are much more careful, which in some cases they might be, but I doubt they all are. Or it's more of a case that this list, these documents have been cleaned, and if you look at the countries and things like that, of course, the big story was Russia, which is, of course, the United States would love to have Putin overthrown in Russia. You have Iceland, which has had problems with the bankster community, the IMF, the World Bank, they're being stubborn. You get Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, same kind of stuff. So basically what you have here, again, very, very suspicious. It seems the only political cronies in the world are the ones that the United States hates. Kind of convenient.
Now, one very interesting aspect of all of this is the connection between George Soros and this whole situation. Now, he has connections to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists that you mentioned earlier. But what role has George Soros and have George Soros-funded organizations played in this Panama Papers situation?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. First of all, you have to keep in mind that Soros would love to see Putin replaced in Russia. I mean, Putin is all about overthrow and revolution wherever he can ferment it. And the ICIJ is a spin-off from the Center for Public Integrity, which is a George Soros-funded operation. So, the links are there to it being an operation, I would say, maybe a combination CIA-Soros thing. What's really fascinating about this is there were 700 journalists that the ICIJ contacted around the world that they had go through various parts of the documents, and the New York Times was not contacted, which I find fascinating because usually they're let in on this stuff. So somebody either did not trust them with the 11 million documents or has some kind of vendetta, but it's extremely unusual for this kind of story to break and this many journalists involved. The one of the top reporters at the New York Times stated that they weren't even aware that these documents existed until the story broke.
So what has some of the fallout been in a lot of these countries? We've talked about Iceland and Russia, but let's talk specifically about Iceland right now. There's already been resignations, and how is the new Pirate Party connected to all of this in Iceland?
Right. Well, that has emerged, and again, I'm really not a big fan of most of the revolutions that go on around the world. Not because the people in charge are good people and are not criminals, but I think generally they're just replaced by other criminals. And what tends to happen is these new people, they may start out with good intentions, but the ones that become the operators and gain control are the ones that will do what is necessary to gain the power. And I reference a lot in my writings a chapter in The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek called Why the Worst Get on Top. And part of that reason is they're willing to do what it takes to get on top. So the Pirate Party is just another, in my view, sort of crony situation. They tend to be left liberal, and which generally means they're in favor of more central power, and I think central power is the main problem. But that problem will not be resolved by revolutions until the masses sort of understand that freedom and liberty should be at the top of the list, and not a change in the power structure where there's just a new guy in charge, because that'll never work.
So what fallout have we seen from this in Russia so far, and what potential fallout do you anticipate seeing in the near future?
I don't think you're going to see much of a fallout in Russia itself. Putin and his people have pretty much said that it was a CIA operation and discounting it. The Russian news media, I don't know how much it can be censored, but outside media, but the Russian media itself is not focusing on the allegations against Putin. They're focused on what's going on in Iceland and things like that. So it's not going to be a problem for Putin, but it's just, to me, it's a signal, an indication that the powers that be do not want Putin in power in Russia. And this is just another sort of loosening of his image and trying to just create problems for Putin with 1,000 different cuts. And that's what went on here. It's not going to topple Putin. It's not going to cause any problems internally. It's just one more cut against Putin that the West, the powers that be, hope will someday push Putin from power.
And what about the law firm involved, Mossack Fonseca? What's the fallout from them, and what is their response been to all this?
Yeah, well, they've come out with the kind of statement you would expect, saying that they can't go into specifics, but some of the information is inaccurate, and I mean, that's the best they can say. They can't start denying some of it and then not denying other, because then you're signaling what's truth and what is not. As far as the firm itself, I would imagine that they're going to have serious problems getting any much more business after this kind of thing. No one's going to go near them. By the way, this is just one law firm. There are many of these global law firms that work and open accounts in Panama and in other places around the world. And so it's not going to have a dent from that direction on the shell corporations that are formed. People will probably become more careful and do what they should do in the first place, and that's make sure they get a nominee that is in no way can be directly linked to the actual owner of the account.
All right. Well, one other organization, I guess, that's been implicated in this that I want to ask you about, and that's FIFA, the international governing body of soccer, of association football. Now, they've had all kinds of scandals going on there, but what is their connection to this Panama Papers issue?
Yeah, a couple of people, the FIFA officers had accounts there, and money was paid into those accounts. But again, it's very interesting that for whatever reason, it's still a bit of a mystery, but the United States is going aggressively after FIFA, given the fact that they've charged most of the top officials of FIFA with taking bribes, and FIFA is all about soccer, and as any American knows, it's a very, very small operation in the United States relative to the rest of the world. I mean, we're about baseball, basketball, football, maybe a little bit of hockey, but it's just extremely odd, the aggressiveness with regard to the United States' involvement in going after FIFA. So there's something there that is still to be exposed as to why that particular focus is going on.
What changes and reforms do you think we're going to see come about of this? Do you think there's going to be any? Do you think we're going to have any international bodies cracking down?
Yeah, you will. I mean, there's some talk about cracking down on them, and again, most of them are calling it because of tax evasion and the fact that these accounts are supposedly used for not paying taxes. But again, I'm sure there's some of that goes on. But technically, for example, in the United States, if you're getting paid revenue, it's extremely, extremely difficult to get away with not reporting. I mean, if you're suddenly making unusual payments of your income in terms of expenses overseas, I mean, that's going to raise a red flag with the IRS right away. So there's certain kinds of payoffs and things like that can be made with overseas accounts, but I don't believe that is a general practice in the United States. And so they'll probably do some stuff, but you have to look. It's the crony leaders that use these things. I mean, that's what's mostly been exposed here. So basically, they're not going to really shut it down. They may make pose and say they're shutting it down and putting in new rules and new laws, but there'll be plenty of loopholes to get around it.
Right. Well, and on that point, let me ask you, what does this say about the state of crony capitalism around the world?
Yeah, well, what it tells you is the state of crony capitalism is doing very well. And the problem is that a lot of people associate this with capitalism, and by capitalism, I mean a situation where companies are free to offer products to people and produce things, but have no special deals with the government. And the only time these type of shell companies emerge where there's payoffs to leaders is a situation when someone is paying a government official off to gain some kind of benefit. And that's not capitalism. That's not free markets and free exchange. That is crony capitalism.
What do you expect to happen next?
I don't. There's a lot of documentation here. They probably have stuff on other people. You'll know who the enemies of the United States are depending upon what other names are leaked. I see there's some secondary associations that try to link Hillary with regard to people that have made donations to her political campaign and stuff like that. 11 million documents, that's a lot of documents out there. And it certainly has not all been disclosed as far as the top players. But if the top players, are really serious people, they're not going to go after them. But there may be others that will just have to play the game in certain ways, and whatever that will call for them to do. But this is more about hurting enemies. So if we see anything else come out, it's a considered. You should consider it an enemy of the leakers, and that's probably the CIA and Soros.
So yeah, to follow up on the disclosure issue, how many of these documents have been released so far, and why won't they all be released? What's preventing that?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, if you're really going to, if this was really a leak, you throw it on the internet and with the search engine so people could search it and see what's there. I mean, even with the 700 journalists on it, 11 million papers, documents is a lot. And we've only seen little bits of that. We don't know what kind of searching they've done, how they've done their searching. So there's a lot of stuff that will be hidden, and it's unlikely that it will all come out. They may, under pressure, they may say they're going to put it all out and put some out. But I don't think. Obviously, there's people that are being protected, and we'll never know who those people are.
Right. So this isn't exactly like a WikiLeaks data dump.
Yeah, it's a leak, but not a leak.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it didn't go through WikiLeaks. Again, I mean, even they weren't comfortable enough, whoever was behind this, and including the ICIJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, to get the New York Times in on the investigation. That should tell you something there. So, no, it's protected stuff, and they're going after very specific targets. And what it does, like I say, is really tell us who's on the top of the U.S. government hit list at this time. And, FIFA's been there for a while, so it's no surprise they're there. Putin's there. Iceland was giving the banksters a hard time, so it's not surprising that they're there. So it's sort of giving us a clue as to who the enemies of the empire are.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any recommended readings for our listeners, and where can our listeners go to find more of your work?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't have anything specifically with regard to the Panama Papers. I do have a couple of blog posts on it, but we pretty much covered everything there. But people should go to my site, economicpolicyjournal.com, and I also have a site called targetliberty.com. And from there, you'll pretty much see everything I'm doing. There's links to other things if there's other articles or other things out there. And I've also have a book out there which is based on a speech I gave at the New York Federal Reserve. And I explained to the Federal Reserve in no uncertain terms the problems they have and how they've created the business cycle and inflation cycles and all that sort of stuff. So that's been very popular. It's called The Fed Flunks, my speech at the New York Federal Reserve, and it's available on Amazon, and there's also a link to it from economicpolicyjournal.com. And there's also, I just do my podcast occasionally, but I do link from economicpolicyjournal.com to those podcasts when they come up, so your listeners should just keep an eye on economicpolicyjournal.com, and they'll know what I'm up to.
Well, great. And you have another book coming up, correct?
Actually, I'm working on a couple. Which one are you referring to? The Confrontations book, or?
Yes.
Yeah. That one's the closest. That should be out, and it's sort of in its final stages. It's complete and written and all that. It's sort of a compilation of essays that I've written before, but they're expanded. There's new essays, and they deal with various confrontations I have had with other individuals with regard to economics and liberty and things like that, in the debates I've had, and I think it'll be a fun read.
Well, it sounds like it will be, that's for sure. And I want to remind everybody on that note to go to wakeupcallpodcast.com/Panama-Papers, and we'll link to Target Liberty from there, of course. We'll link to Economic Policy Journal. We'll link to the Fed Flunks. All of the websites and resources we've been discussing we'll link to from there. So at wakeupcallpodcast.com/Panama-Papers. And I can't recommend highly enough that everyone go and check out targetliberty.com and economicpolicyjournal.com. They're great sites, and there's always something interesting and new on there. So thank you for what you do with that, and thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we can speak to you again sometime soon.
Okay, great. My pleasure. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wake Up Call podcast.
If you would like to listen to more episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, or subscribe on Stitcher. And check out our website at wakeupcallpodcast.com.
There you will find show notes pages and comment sections dedicated to the show. You can also email us at contact@wakeupcallpodcast.com if you're interested in being interviewed for the show or have any other suggestions.
Thank you.